So hi guys, Jonathan Graham here for Guitar Interactive Magazine. We are sitting here with Andy from Travis and we're at the Gibson Garage in London. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Better now I'm surrounded by guitars.
Absolutely. Now, you can't quite see them behind us here, but trust me, they are behind us.
There's a lot of them.
The cameras for sure. So you guys, you're down getting prepared to do some fantastic shows once again. How the tour like the rehearsals going so far?
Well, yesterday was the first day, so it was just getting set up, just getting to see each other again, hang out a little bit. But today will be the first day proper we start into it, yeah. Nice. So we got a few different, we just announced the UK tour at the end of the year, so we've got to get ready for that. But the first thing coming up is the Killers shows, and that's like a 40-minute set. So we were talking about it earlier on, it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult to sort of hone it down to 40 minutes, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, because just as we're coming in and we were chatting about it there, I mean, it's been quite a while since you guys actually did support for a band. Why choose the Killers for this?
Well, kind of, we'd known them for years, and weirdly the Killers, their first set they ever played was a 3-song set, and one song was a Travis song. Right. So they've sort of, known of us for years, and then we sort of got to know them, and they're lovely guys, great band, and just it sort of happened that they were coming on tour at the same time as we were releasing an album, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity. And it's nice, it's an early night, I'm finished by about 8:30, so I get to put my feet up and enjoy myself and enjoy the Killers show,
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, the sort of standard going on at 9 o'clock, I mean, you are kind of these days going, I wouldn't mind seeing a show that kicks off a little bit earlier at night.
Yeah,
I wonder why it ended up being
not getting any younger, so it's a nice early night for me, but it's great, it'll be a really great tour. I'm really looking forward to it. So, but yeah, I mean, we support, when we first started, we supported everyone. We did about 3 years of non-stop supports. We did like Oasis, we did Cass, we did every band that would take us. We went on supports, and it was great. It's a great opportunity to get out there and just sort of try and knock them off the stage.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't want to have to try and follow Travis, that's for sure.
I'm sure they'll do all right. Yeah.
So you guys are back with LA Times, which is going to drop in July the 12th. Fantastic 10 more songs to add to the collection. Yeah, for another fantastic 10 songs to add to the collection. When did the process of putting this album begin?
It's been probably about the last year and a half, 2 years, I mean, the album before 10 songs we released just before the first big lockdown started, and we were making videos across continents because Fran lives in LA, so it was a really difficult record, It was great, but it was difficult to do everything because we were all separated and everyone was obviously isolating at the time. So we were really keen to get in and do another record, in normal circumstances. Of course, yeah. So we'd been talking about it, and then Fran had been writing for a long while, and just the songs came up, and last summer songs were ready, and we got a fantastic producer, Tony Hoffer, and we went to LA, and it was 3 weeks in LA. It was a really intense session, but it was great, and we got everything done in those 3 weeks.
Was the writing done actually?
The writing was done. No, the writing was done before that. So we had all the songs before it. We sort of sat with the songs for a while, and then sort of went in, and it was just a straight 3 weeks every day in this little studio in LA, and it was fantastic, And
what was the first song that came out of the sort of writing sessions?
The first one, I think, probably Raise the Bar was the first one that sort of Fran played to me. That was like, oh yeah, this is something special. And it's good. It sounds like Travis, but it's kind of step forward. It sounds a bit different.
Yeah, well, as a fan, that's how I was feeling. I thought, wow, this really is this perfect balance of having that sort of nostalgic element, because you wouldn't notice obviously bands develop and evolve, and your playing has evolved and songwriting has evolved, but in terms of like Fran's voice and what have you, you feel like it could be something from the early 2000s or now, but yet still with that modern twist to it.
Weirdly, Fran's singing better than ever at the moment. He's sort of hit a real, I think especially men's voices go through, your voice breaks when you're younger, but I think you have a sort of second voice break, and he's hit this really nice, mature voice at the moment, and his singing is really powerful at the moment. It's great, it's weird being on stage and you can feel the difference in things, and when he hits notes, you're like, whoa, that's powerful. So he's in a great place at the moment, and writing-wise, having lived in LA for all these years now, he's sort of soaked up, and it's, he's kind of always felt like a little bit, like of an outsider, and it's his outside view of this place he's been living in. And, we're living in quite crazy times at the moment anyway, but I think, and funny because, I've come down to London for this, and you see it's a sort of much more intense version of everything that's going on,
Yeah, I mean, a big standout for me, I think, so far is Naked in New York. I mean, such a beautiful track.
Oh, yeah, that's
incredible playing from yourself throughout it, but so restrained. But yet you've created this sort of wall of sound.
Yeah, it's funny.
Where do you begin with to process something like that, putting it together?
It's kind of weird. We've been doing this so long. You know, you kind of have a shorthand with each other a little bit. You know, you have like sort of things that you sort of, you know what's, you know, with Fran's songwriting. I know the space. You know, now where I can put things in, and with anything, it's like, you know, I'll do the piano and the record and the guitars. It's finding enough space in a song to put your parts in, but not interfering with the songs. You know, and that's the thing, you know, I had to learn when I was younger was, you know, you when you're younger and you're a guitarist, you just want to impress other guitarists, and then you realise that you're not playing to every guitarist in the world, you're playing to people that just want to hear a song. So you've got to find your way to sort of, you know, make your mark, but not step on the song, really.
Absolutely, yeah. And do you find that it's more of a kind of an instinctive thing when you're choosing the notes?
We tend to just sit and play, you know, and just sort of sit and go through the track and see what works, you know. And as I say, it's we've been playing together a long time. We can sit in a room and play for hours on end, you know, and without thinking about it anymore. And it's a bit of trust. It's like a language you learn with each other, you know, that only you can speak.
Now, obviously, there's 10 tracks on here. Going through a process of writing, there must be a lot that sort of falls by the wayside. Is there some stuff that didn't quite make the record that could have?
You know, Fran's got quite a sort of high bar, so he won't play you things that fall by the wayside. Right. You know, I mean, you don't get to see them, but I know he writes them. You know, yeah. Every writer does. Every writer writes, you know, maybe 10, 20 songs for every decent one. You know, and so he's doing it all the time. But yeah, no, we don't get to hear them, which is great. You know, we just get to hear the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the gear that you were using on the record, guitar wise?
I literally travelled to LA with my Les Paul, and that was it.
Right.
I've had the same Les Paul, it's like 72 Les Paul that I've had since I was 19. And it was one of my dad's mates ran a music hire place, and this guitar had just been hired out. It was just used for, like, I think it was Pebble Mill. He used to hire it out for this old show on BBC.
Okay.
And you know, when I got it, I'd been told that Dave Stewart had mimed with it, you know, and all these people had mimed with this guitar, and it was like, I'm not quite beat up Les Paul, but I couldn't afford that guitar at the time, you know, and he quite kindly sort of gave it to me for way less than I should have got it for, you know, and it's the same guitar I've had since I was 18 or 19, you know. And
is this the one with the mini humbuckers?
Yeah. And so that's basically what I travelled to LA with. I mean, they had some decent guitars in there, but that's the one I'll tend to rely on most of all.
Absolutely.
And it's just, you know, it's just got a lovely tone to it, you know, and I know exactly how to play it and everything.
But obviously, so many incredible notes have been played on that over the years. Yeah. Have you had to do any work to it? Any
well,
tweaks?
Not me, not personally. You know, that would be a really bad thing if I was to do any work to it. It's been refretted a couple of times. Yeah. That's the main thing. It's just,
but in terms of performance, you've never needed to sort of modify anything. It was just
never touched it. No, and it's just, you know, when I first got it, I was like, oh my god, this is guitar for life. You know, it's like meeting your life partner. It really was with that guitar.
So what amps did they have in the studio then that you were getting the tones from?
Well, I mean, mostly I'll use oranges, but we had, I mean, we went through everything there, and they had about 30 different old, like, so, you know, the old amps. So I mean, I can't even remember what you would literally just be, you would plug your way around them, and it was a great studio, and there was lots of old vintage gear there. They had one of the new Mellotrons, which I don't know if you've tried them.
I haven't, no.
Absolutely lovely. Because I was a bit suspicious of anything that's not analog. You know, I'm you know, quite old school. Oh, it's the warmth on it, the sound of it. You know, that was really nice. So we used that a lot in the record, but. Just loads of different amps, really, just plugging into everything. What,
you know, seeing Status Quo at 12 at the Apollo.
You've done your research.
You know, what kind of impact did that have on your life?
Profound, you know. It was just, so me and my mate, we were into Status Quo, and his dad took us to the Apollo, and it was like, I think it was a year before the Apollo shut down. It would have been 84, yeah. So, and he just went, because, you know, Apollo, you could see everything there. He just let us run down. We sat on two bikers' shoulders in about the 5th row and just sat and watched this really loud Status Quo show. Yeah. And it was more that, it wasn't so much the music, it was the feeling, you know, the feeling in your chest,
sure.
Like loud music, and I was like, this is where I want to be. I found my place, you know, and that was it. I went, and I think my mum still got the jotter somewhere, and they wrote in school that, you know, that's, you know, you know, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time or something, and that was me, and it was like sort of in a space-aged Apollo with a space lift going up to the stage or something, you know.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the feeling, because obviously with music and
Yeah.
what you're trying to do with it, you know, that communication, that feeling that
Yeah,
an
yeah,
audience gets from you. An awful lot of great artists, you know, they find those early experiences, that early feeling, it still sort of guides them on making the right decision. Is that how it feels for you, that you still make the right decisions musically because of that feeling?
Hopefully, yeah, you know, there's no rule book. You know, even we've been doing this a long time now, and you say you go to a record, how do you know your parts? You don't.
Yeah.
You know, every time there's a new song, you don't know if you're going to mess it up. You don't know what you're going to do, and that's the excitement of it. You know, there's no. I think there maybe you learn a little bit, but there's no great wisdom. You know,
Sure.
I don't go, oh, I've got this. Every time that you're doing something new, you're like that. Well, let's see if I've got this.
Yeah.
But that's the fun of it. And like with a show, every time we step on stage, you don't know what's going to happen. But that's the excitement. That's that feeling I got when I went to a concert when I was younger. I still absolutely shit myself before I go on stage.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I've been doing this a long time, and I'm still. If you watch me the first 10 seconds I'm on stage, my eyes will be closed, and it'll be just like I sort of gathering myself together and then let go.
How do you think you would feel if you didn't feel like that stepping out?
If I didn't now, I'd worry, because it meant I didn't care. You know, some people don't. You know, like it's weird. Me and Dougie in the band, we the ones that get nervous. Fran and Neil are calm as a cucumber.
Yeah.
On stage, they're just like, oh right, okay, it's just another. You know, like,
But
that's always been your thing. Yeah. So
that combined dynamic makes the perfect show.
Exactly.
Has there been anything in a live situation that gave you reason to be nervous? Like once you've got out there, has anything actually gone wrong?
All the time. you just you know, when things go wrong, you just cover it up. I've fallen off stages. There was one, and it's when I'm talking to young musicians about it, I'll go, never stop fighting on stage. Never give up. We were playing, I think it was a festival in Switzerland, and it was one of these sort of quite picnicky sort of festivals during the day, and the crowd were all out just sitting down and having their dinners, you know, having their lunches or whatever, and it wasn't the greatest gig for us, you know. It was a bit so like, and the PA broke.
Oh.
So it's sort of kind of, you know, there was this kind of like sort of, you know, 2 minutes of everyone running about, and Fran just grabbed every monitor at the front of the stage and turned them towards the crowd and just told the monitor guy to turn up the music, and the whole crowd got up, and it ended up being one of the best gigs we've ever played, and kind of like something bad can happen and it can kickstart something good. So I always think you just never ever give up when you're playing. Never stop and think we've lost this. Until you walk off that stage, you haven't lost that crowd. And I think that comes from, we played for like about 10 years around little bars and little pubs and things, you know, little clubs. More animals than people in some cases. I remember there being 4 dogs and 3 people in one gig. You know?
Where was that?
That was our first support tour. This band Elka, and it was like somewhere some sort of fleecing fucking or something. It was, and it literally was. But you know, we played, and you know, people didn't want you on that stage sometimes, but you fought for it, and I think that fighting for it, you never forget that.
Absolutely. And for me personally, you know, All I Want to Do Is Rock was my introduction
to
you guys, of course. Didn't get to see you live until you were supporting Oasis on the Be Here Now tour. But just talking about some of those tours and shows, looking through the set list, because I wanted to go back and see what you played that night, and then I was checking out, you know, previous shows and obviously playing Glasgow many times. But I noticed that there was a date on there going back to 1991 where you played, well, it wasn't called the Garage then, but whatever it was called before. What's your recollection of playing that show in 1991?
That would have been before Dougie was in the band. It was Chris and Jeff, the 2 brothers, were in the band. I don't think there would have been any songs. Turn was one of the oldest songs. Turn was one of the songs we had before Dougie joined the band, but I think that would have been the only song that would have been about before then. Wow. But I don't think in 91 that would have been there.
Yeah.
I seem to remember a particularly poor song called Carnival of Clouds.
I see.
Back in the Glass Onion.
Is there a recording somewhere?
There's not of that. There is a Glass Onion EP, which is what's on that. Oh, is Carnival on that? I couldn't even tell you what's on it now. It's a 4-track EP, and it's pretty special.
So that you know, mentioning there that Turn was around. Well,
yes, before
in that era. Why did that not make Good Feeling?
It's weird because we had Writing to Reach You for Good Feeling as well, and we tried Writing to Reach You, and we just weren't ready for it as a band. You know, we weren't good enough at that point. You know, and some songs they sort of take a while. They take a while for you as a band to catch up and actually do them justice. Yeah. So there was a few that, you know, didn't make Good Feeling, but we knew they were good enough songs that they would sort of come around at some point. Absolutely. And they all came back when we were doing The Man Who.
Perfect, and you know, and album, both incredible albums. When Jools Holland introduced you on that performance, You know, way back in '96, you know, he says this thing about how there's only 750 copies of your single, and that your record deal, you didn't even really have a proper record deal. That was the way he described it.
Yeah.
What's the truth to that?
That is the truth. It was a self-pressed EP. And I think there was about 750 copies. That we moved down to London the summer before that, in the summer of '96, and we were rehearsing, and the producer and all the people from Later came along to watch us, and it was like that was our sort of like, you know, time to, if we didn't do it then, it wasn't going to happen, you know. So they sat in front of us, and it was really intimidating, but we just played absolute nuts off, you know, and it was really good, and we got that show, which was amazing because that was before we had a record. Well, by the time it came out, I think we had a record deal, but actually when we got the show, we didn't have a record deal at the time. So it was quite unprecedented at the time.
Absolutely.
And,
you must have been roasted in that performance. That big coat.
I learned a big lesson that day. Don't wear your big coat you bought in Camden on the TV because of the bright lights on. The funniest thing was we were sitting. And it was like kind of sort of bleacher seats, as far as I can remember for that setup. And we were sitting in these seats during the day, and there was a big grand piano in front of us. And someone sort of sat down at the grand piano, and they were playing, and it was Easy by the Commodores. And I went, that sounds really good. And I went, that's Lionel Richie. And it was Lionel Richie just sitting like maybe twice as far away as you are from us, with his back to us, just playing Easy on the grand piano. And that was quite a moment, because we'd just come from Glasgow like a month before then, you know, sort of like, never seen anyone famous before, and Lionel Richie's playing Easy in front of you on the piano. Was
there ever a time, this might have been the time, seeing Lionel Richie, but you know, was there a time where you really felt like, oh, we've made it now?
There's lots of little bits, but I still don't feel we've made it. It's still trying, but you know, it was always meeting people, you know, met Paul McCartney, met David, all these people, you know, when you're like that, oh my God, these people are the royalty in this situation, you know, like they're our rock royalty. So meeting those people, you're like that, well, you know, some doors have been opened up for us, obviously, that, you know, we're in a good place.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then I mentioned it before, you know, seeing you guys, you know, supporting Oasis, but that Be Here Now tour, that was a big deal for you guys, getting on that.
That was brilliant. It was a really good tour, you know, and they were fantastic to us. They really looked after us, and I, you know, still see Liam now and again, you know, and it's really lovely to see him. It's great. He's doing really well. He's back. He's just started his Definitely Maybe tour, hasn't he? Which is amazing. Yeah. So. It was really fun. We did 3 tours with him in the end. We did 2, and I think it was 2 in Britain and 1 in America, and it was great fun. You know, I mean, that was a real laugh touring with Oasis, and it did us so much. It got us, the amount of people I see that say, I first saw you when you supported Oasis.
Of course, yeah. No, I mean, you know, from a fan's perspective, you know, it seemed like their tours at that point were quite chaotic, but from the inside, how was it?
You know, it had this elements of chaos, you know. I think those guys always did, you know.
Because that night, someone threw a bottle at SECC.
I was going to ask. That was the one that was about 3 or 4 songs, wasn't it? And Bonehead got the bottle went to Bone. The funniest thing about that was, and it was, I remember that night well, because Jill, the photographer, was there, Jill Filmanowski, and Gaza was there with Jimmy, right. And the dressing rooms were all just like closed off, but there was no roofs on them. It was just like closed off thing, and there was just tons of stuff flying over it, because obviously the fans weren't very happy about the gig getting cancelled. It was still a good gig though. I think,
you know,
it was a memorable night.
As a 14-year-old, I still it was amazing. Well, I think
it worked well for us.
Well, that's it. I think having such a great set from you guys that made it easier. You know, following on from that, you know, you've got this great record. You guys you're on the up. You go into writing for The Man Who. You've already got a couple of songs ready. What, you know, was the feeling with the band fantastic at that point, that we were going to go into the studio and make something great?
I mean, kind of, it was the same, you know, we'd been doing it so long, we just kept moving forwards. But it was weird. I mean, the Man Who took quite a while. It was over a year sort of doing it, and we sort of we were kind of finding our feet, because it was quite a different sounding record from Good Feeling. It was obviously much more acoustic, much more sort of melancholy. Yeah. And so we went in, we did one session with Mike Hedges out in France, which was great. We got 4 songs for that, and that was where we did Why Does It Always Rain on Me. Turn was recorded there, I think Writing to Reach You, and something else. And then we sort of floundered for a bit after that. We had the 4 songs, and then Fran and Dougie bumped into Nigel Godrich, and, you know, managed to convince him to sort of, you know, finish off the album. And so we went and did that. finished the album, sort of brought it out, and it got absolutely slagged off when it first came out.
See, it's interesting that, because again, I know I keep saying that I'm sounding like a fanboy, but I mean, maybe it was different in Scotland, but I don't remember these singles dropping and people loved it, you know. So this whole thing now, it feels like revisionist history to me. People, but you know, you're going to know better. So.
Well, I mean, the singles did all right, you know, and you know, they were getting played by radio. But I remember buying like the sort of broadsheets when they were, and literally it was like 2 out of 5. Like Q gave it 2 out of 5 and things, you know. And we sat there, and you know, we were quite philosophical about it. We were like, well, we've got all these gigs lined up for the summer, you know. Let's just go out and in a blaze of glory. We thought that would be it. We thought, well, if we were getting these reviews, this will be the last record we make. But let's just go out, enjoy ourselves, and play our asses off. And we did that, and it just started building a record. It was quite old school, because the record was going out the charts when we did Glastonbury that summer. And then that's the day, you know, we were on in the afternoon. And, you know, it rained when we played Why Does It Always Rain on Me? And that was I always say, it's not, I mean, that one thing's quite small. You know, it wasn't the best gig in the world, you know. It was like, it was all right, and people looked a bit pissed off that it was raining, you know. It wasn't like this legendary moment where, you know, we could see what was suddenly happening. It was just one of these things that happened. But I always say it's like all the work that went up to that was what made that. It's like building a bonfire.
Sure.
You build it, pack it really well, you pack it really tightly, you make it really well for years, and then you're like, shit, I haven't got any matches, I haven't got light. And you need that one little spark. And most bands will tell you they had that one little bit of luck. You know, it may be the point with Oasis when McGee walks into the King Tut's. There's that little one thing that happens, but it's all the work up to that little spark sets a light. So, you know, so that little thing happened, and the more you put in before it, the smaller the little spark has to be. You know,
of course.
And, so when that happened, that's when that was a tipping point, really, and that's when it all changed. But you know, up until that point, well, let's just play our asses off and enjoy ourselves, you know, because it might be the last time around. Because we really, you know, these reviews were quite scathing.
I did wonder with you know, when you're looking at the production credits and the fact that Nigel Godrich is on there and Mike is on there, you know, because obviously the majority of the time a producer's going to take on an entire project. Was the plan initially to have Mike Hedges do the full record?
No, it's weird. I mean, because funnily enough, when we were doing, we still see Mike and Nigel all the time. When we were doing the record, we were staying at Nigel's place, and then I've just been working with Mike and another thing, sort of helping him out. So you still see him all the time. So I was talking to Mike about, you know, because at the time I was like, I didn't really know what was happening, and Mike did the 4 tracks, and then I think he'd just come off a run of tons of records.
I see.
He'd made a load of records. He'd been doing the Manics and Texas all that time. So I think that was he'd done that, and it was great. But he was like, right, okay, I need a sort of break now. So it was kind of that was where the break came in.
And was the writing all finished at that point?
No,
anyway?
it was getting written all the way through.
So
I mean, literally,
writing,
sort of like we did the session with Mike, and then sort of he needed a break, and then sort of, as I say, Fran until he bumped into Nigel, we went, okay. Managed to convince him to sort of record some songs. We didn't know if we were finishing a record or not, so we recorded some songs, and we still needed, you know, I think it was one more song, and Driftwoods was one of the last things that was written for the record. That was written through the record.
Amazing.
And I mean, Fran nearly lost that in the tape. It was like, sort of like a little dictaphone tape, and he'll always tell a story about how he pressed off rather than record. And I was round at his house, and there was me and him chatting rubbish for an hour, and then just at the end of this little dictaphone, he goes down and does the dishes, and he sings the Driftwood thing as he's doing the dishes, and it's right in the distance of this tape, but he heard it, and he's like, right, okay, that's that song. Then we went in, that was the last thing we recorded for the record.
Amazing. And working with Nigel Godrich, I mean, he wasn't quite the guy that these days is so, you know, I mean, obviously he'd done OK Computer, but, you know, these days it's kind of like, it's almost considered as if everybody touched his gold sort of thing. Working with him back then, good experience for you?
Oh, fantastic. You know, I mean, both Nigel and Mike, they were great. You know, these were world-class producers, I mean, like just little bands, you know, still at that point. So by that point, it was Steve Lillywhite, Mike Hedges, and Nigel Godrich.
Of course,
we're a pretty high batting average of producers, you know. It was brilliant. And I mean, Nigel's brilliant. Nigel's very, I mean, beyond his ideas, which are great, it's the sounds he gets. You know, he will sit sit in front of your amp with a microphone, and he will find the best spot for it. You know, he's really into the sound of everything, and you don't get, some producers aren't like that. They'll just have engineers that will worry about that. Nigel sort of is into every part of it, you know. So he'd do that, but then, you know, he would sort of, you know, make it sound like a record as you were making it.
Yeah,
which was great, you know, because sometimes you'd be in the studio and then we'll go, you know, we'll work on that that sound, we'll work on that sound. He may have it in your ears as it was going to sound on a record, which is fantastic, you know.
Do you enjoy being produced?
Oh yeah, love it. I mean, even like something like this new record, Tony Hoffer, it's someone to come in, you know, as I say, we've worked with each other for all these years, and we'll have a sort of shorthand of working, and we'll sort of do things. You can get a little bit lazy as well, you know, you can fall into sort of tropes, you know, I'll do like an Andy style guitar line,
sure.
and having a producer going, you can do better than that is really invaluable. I think it's having someone outside that can kick your arse a little bit.
Absolutely. And what's the key for you? And because you're the master at leaving the space,
or
filling the space where it needs to be. But you know, it's quite difficult. It's the $1 million question. But you know, what's the key to actually knowing the right spots to put stuff in and to leave it out?
I think what I always try and do to a certain extent is when I'm playing the guitar, sing the song in my head. Right. If you can't sing the song in your head while you're playing the guitar, then you're doing something that's too complicated. Because it's people have got to hear the vocal, and if you can't concentrate on the vocal and doing your guitar line at the same time, then you're sort of stepping over the vocal. So I think just listen to the vocal line is my advice to any guitarist. Listen to what the vocal's doing, and that's what you've not got to mess up, really.
And working with other instruments, your piano, your singer as well, has that expanded your overall musical?
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, the piano was my first instrument when I was younger, and because that's what you do when you're a kid. And then when I was 12, I got into AC/DC, got into Status Quo, and all that. The piano wasn't quite cutting it for them, you know, and you can't carry it about with you. So I got a cheap guitar and learned all my records. And then for years, you know, that was it, just learning guitar. And I love the guitar because I love I love the expression on it. You know, I can't express myself on a piano the way I can express myself on a guitar. And that'll never happen. But through lockdown, I went back to the piano and started learning it again, you know, and taught myself some classical pieces. And I approached the guitar in a very emotional sense. I approached the piano in a much more technical sense. You know, it's a technical instrument for me. And so I've learned that quite sort of technical and theoretically. So therefore, I can bring sort of a little bit of knowledge in that area, but I'm still as dumb as I am in the guitar, which is lovely, you know. And I don't want to be too technical or too theory in the guitar, because I love the feel of it. I love feeling my way around it.
That's it. It's like an extension of you. Like, just like when you're talking,
exactly,
you want that.
And because it's so expressive, if you start getting too technical and start worrying about, you know, boxes and things like that, it's, you know, I think it takes away from the feeling you can put into it. Absolutely. So therefore, I've got an instrument that I can get technical on. The piano I can, you know, and I know all that, because I can't, you know, you can express yourself to a certain extent, but it's not, you know, I'm not bending notes. It's not, you know, it's not got the same feel to me. But I do love playing the piano. It's a different thing.
And what keeps you inspired these days?
Well, weirdly, my son, he's 18, he'll play me music sometimes and it'll blow me away, and I'll hear things, and you know, get me into like Frank Ocean or something, and you know, and there's still people making exciting music, and there's still music to be made, and we're still making music that excites me. It's not done yet. We've not finished with music yet, which is what keeps me going. You know, I'll still hear one thing every month that I'm like, oh, I love that. And that makes me think, well, we're not finished with this yet.
Oh, no, for sure. I mean, because, you know, obviously, you know, and not too long ago, it was still a major event, an album dropping. These days, albums drop and people are asking, when's the next one? You know, it seems to be like that music has almost become this thing that people kind of put on while they're doing something else, as opposed to...
I think so. It's weird, you know. I mean, and I've lectured in music the last 3-4 years at universities in Liverpool, you know, and you know, I also say to the kids the importance of listening to music that's gone before. It's weird. When I was young, you know, you say you get into the Stones, you'd go back and you'd chase chess records, and because you'd chase chess records, you go back and chase blues records, and that wasn't easy. You'd have to go and find like these obscure records in shops or go and read books in libraries. Now they've got it in the pocket. They've got the entire history of music in their pocket, and they don't so often look back. And I'm like, you've got to see where this music came from, because it's important. You know, it's the history. You know, you've got to know your history of things. And weirdly, I think guitars are coming back now, because all this AI stuff can't do what a guitar can do. It can't make that sound. It can make a sound of, you know, keys. It can make a sound of a computer. It can make the sound of a drum machine. It can't make the sound a guitar makes, or a drum kit being hit, or, you know, like an acoustic instrument. So I think they'll come back. I think that this sort of yearning for real things, and you look at it, and, you know, my sons and all his mates are into vinyl now, and they're all, you know, they all collect vinyl and they're listening to it. And it's turning back round, I think, to the point where music's going to be something special again. And it's what I was saying to him about vinyl. It's not even about having a physical thing. I'm not bothered if it's on 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 the computer and a physical thing. It's sitting in one place and listening to music makes it slightly more special, because you've got speakers in front of you. Everyone listens to music in the headphones now, and it's this portable, disposable thing. Whereas if you put a record on, you're choosing to sit in that place and listen to that record for however long you're there, and it elevates it slightly. And that's what it was to me when I was younger. Music was like a religion, It was, you went to the Church of Music and listened to, whatever album, and you get lost in it. I think that's coming back.
And every time you listen, you hear something different.
Yeah, exactly.
As well,
exactly.
Again.
Because your familiarity with it, and and don't get me wrong, I love streaming music. I've listened to music I would never have heard because of streaming music. Like really obscure records that I would never have found in record shops. I love that as well, and I love having that. I think it's a brilliant tool to have. But sometimes even I will go on to stream music, and it's like when you go for a holiday to an all you can eat buffet sort of restaurant, and you end up just with a plate with tons of bits. And, you're like, oh, that salad looks nice. Oh, there's some Indian food there. I'll have some of that. Oh, yeah. And you'll just end up with a plate full of lots of different things, and you'll not enjoy any of it, even though it's of probably nice quality. Whereas, if you sit and listen to an album, you're sitting listening to a plate of food that someone's made for you, that they're going, right, okay, this goes well with this, goes well with this. And I think we're getting back to that. At the risk of sounding like an old guy.
Well, LA Times is definitely a record like that. That's very, very curated. What's standing out for you, on your listens? Obviously, you're very, very close to it, having produced it. But going through the album, you've stepped away from it a little bit, coming back, you're listening to it, you're preparing to play it live. What tracks are standing out to you the most?
It's funny, you mentioned Naked in New York City. That's one of my favourites, because it's got a feeling of like an old Nelson track or something. It's like something off of Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, but also a little bit of Ryan Adams as well.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Some of that. Yeah. So that one was a really nice point. And it's weirdly, my relationship with songs tends to be like about points in the studio or points on stage. Yeah. So that was a really lovely point in the studio where we all just sat. So the actual live track was done piano, Fran and guitar, acoustic guitar and vocal, and Dougie and a double bass, and we did it live. And it was just one of those points. We did it maybe 4 or 5 times, and the time we got it, you always know when you've got a brilliant take in the studio, because everything goes quiet for about 30 seconds, because everyone's letting every note ring out. If it's been bad, someone will talk. Within 10 seconds, someone will go, okay, so we do another one. If you have that 30-second silence, everyone's like,
you just feel it.
That was a good one. I mean, and so you'll finish the take and you'll know you've done well, but you'll know everyone else has done well because this weird 30-second silence, and it's brilliant. That point is better than doing the song almost. It's that point where you're like, everybody's happy. Everybody's happy with that. Everyone feels the same way as I feel about that track. So that was one of those moments. But weirdly, we started routining some of the new songs yesterday, and Gaslight is fun to play. That's a real fun one to play. So I think that's going to be one of my favourites live. Yeah, I love how of all the lyrics on on the LA Times, Fran's managed to get a line in. You don't even know you're a fanny. Yeah. which is really only for people from Glasgow. When I heard that, I thought, wait, I went back like 2 or 3 times. That is what he's saying there. Yeah. That's right up there with a foot without a sock. Exactly. It's weird that this record, I think, is his most Scottish. There's points where he does sound really Scottish in there, which is nice. I mean, there's a. What do you call it? The River, which is obviously quite chest beat. It's like a very sort of that's a very Scottish feeling track, and then just quite spontaneously combust. He leans into the Scottish accent a little bit. Which it's a beautiful record. Something that really stood out to me as well was the fact that all the tracks are very short. Because as it was going through, I thought, wait, it's now when you think back to the first records you were getting, and a lot of the music back then. The albums tended to, or even all the Beatles records, it's hard to find a track that's more than like 3.5 minutes. Yeah, it's weird. And then in the 70s, it's sort of like the songs started getting longer again. Longer in the 90s, they're longest. Was that a conscious effort? No, I think if you've got a good song, you don't need to do an awful lot to it. Sometimes the longer the song you're filling out, or you're making it, trying to make it more interesting, which is great, and Shine On You Crazy Diamond's one of my favourite songs, and that hangs about quite a while, doesn't it? But it does so much. But I think with these songs, they'd said their thing and they'd done their bit. I mean, I'm weird. I have to be convinced to do guitar solos if there's ever guitar solos and things, because I don't naturally like doing them. Not because I don't like playing guitar solos, but I don't I don't like when I hear an album and it's just full of guitar solos.
You feel like it go a bit naff.
Yeah, I feel like it's just done for the sake of it. You know, it's insert guitar solo here, and so I've become the opposite of that. I have to be convinced that a song needs a guitar solo, and then once I'm convinced, I'll do my best. You know, I'll do my damnedest to give it a good guitar solo. You know, so like Spontaneously Combust. That's one of my favourites for a while. You know, the little slide solo and that. But you know, I have to be sort of convinced that that's what the song needs, because I don't want to be that tosser that just throws in solos all the time, you know.
So when you are sort of, you know, you get your arm twisted to do that, what's your approach to writing a solo?
It's try and do something I've never heard before.
Okay.
You know, you want bits of familiarity in there, but try and make the guitar sound different from I've ever heard it sounding. You know, so. And again, if I just did a solo and it was all the sort of like, you know, the usual sort of tropes, I'd probably not let them use it. You know, it's just why do it? You know, unless it was really what the song wanted, and you were doing it because of that. It was like a reference to sort of guitar solos I've come before. But you know, like, you know, from the start, all I wanted to do is rock solo onwards. It was kind of like, you know, okay, it's got to be like that. It's got to be something that I haven't done or haven't heard before. So I'll always try and do that to a certain extent, and then. If I do fall into it, Fran will push me. He'll go, nope. You've done that. You've done that before, Andy. Or, you know, or you can do something more interesting than that. So, you know, it's good. I mean, we've known each other so long. We can push each other a little bit as well.
Absolutely.
You know, we know what we're capable of.
So, what's the live setup for these shows coming up, and obviously in December as well? Obviously that. Classic Les Paul is going to be.
It's always there. I never go anywhere without it. So that is my main guitar. I've got a backup one of that we found. That was another 72. That's not quite as good, but it's close to. And then I've got a third one that's just there. That's, you know, it's a lovely Les Paul, but it's just not my Les Paul. But you know, it does. Then. That is my main setup, just the 3 Les Pauls for live.
Wow, because we've seen you play, like, you know, you've been out with Tellys and you've got the double neck.
Yeah, look at the double neck. That's a backbreaker though, man. I'm not that. My back's bad enough with Les Pauls over the years. You know, they're not like guitars. That is a heavy thing. The 330 sometimes comes out, you know, because it's a fantastic guitar, but it's, you know, you need to be a noisy.
Is that the same one you used on the Jules Holland?
Yeah, exactly. That's the one we've had all these years. So, I mean, I've got my guitars. I'll buy guitars, but they're just for me to play at home. I've got a lovely SG at home. Actually, I must admit that was a 90s one that I'll use in a lot of recordings and things, you know, because it's just lovely to play, and you know, it's me fulfilling my Angus fantasies.
You're still going through the orange rig? Yeah,
still through the orange rig, and that's the same orange rigs I've had for years. That was the handmade ones, you know, from the old boards, and they just sound so rich. It's funny because we'd just done a few shows, and we did China, and we were in Copenhagen just doing like festival stuff, and we didn't take our rigs. I took my guitars, but it was hired in sort of rigs. And it's so nice to be back to my own when I get home. Even like, you know, the hired orange stuff, which is lovely, you know, and nice. Back to my own amp.
Just,
you know,
it's your sound.
It's just when you play through something for a long while. It's the same with the guitar. When you play through it for a long while, they sort of you inhabit them to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And what about pedals wise?
Pedals, again, I haven't bought a new pedal in 12 years because I've just found the last one I got that changed my pedal board was the Boss version of the Roland Space Echo.
Okay.
So I've got that one, and I've still got the two old. I mean, I've still got 2 old Line 6 delays. You know, the green ones that I still love. You know, even yesterday we were doing one of the songs, Bus on the record, and it's got like a backwards guitar solo, and the backwards delay on the Line 6s is my favourite reverse delay of any sort of, you know, pedals. And I'll buy new pedals now. You know, what did I get recently? I've got one of the Splicer pedals, you know, which is sort of,
sure.
you know, which is a load of fun, you know, and everything like that. But you know, I've sort of kind of got the pedals that I rely on. So there's 2 Line 6 delays, the Space Echo. I think 3 delays is as many as I'm allowed, really. You know, I've got the other one I can't live without is the Boss. It's the little pitch PS5.
Right.
I don't know if you remember them. Because that's for Closer. You know, because it's an EBO with a sliding note. Okay, so you use the tremolo arm thing in that. You know, so it's a pitch shift in that. So I can't do a gig without that. So the PS5 is a mainstay. Big Muff, obviously. but that's changed over the years. I've had all different big muffs over the years.
What, have they just sort of died?
Yeah, died. Yeah, you know, I did the old Russian ones and then sort of the American one, and the one I've got at the moment's lasted me quite a while now. Saying that, we just when we were coming back from China, gear got mangled. So there's a new PS5 and a new tremolo in there. You know, so the gear got mangled just before a show, which was fun. And is there anything else in there? Oh, an old spring reverb pedal. Yeah, it can kick sometimes and make noise.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, you know, when we're out on tour and you're travelling around, you know, have you picked anything up recently? But you say 12 years since you...
12 years since 12 years since I added a pedal to my board. You know, I'll buy a lot of pedals. And we went through a lot. You know, you'll try a lot of things when you're in the studio. But 12 years till something's actually stuck. You know, and as I say, when Boss brought you that little Space Echo, it was like that. Yeah, that's one for me. You know, because you can do the swirls and the whoops and things. It's great. You know, and it's a really warm sounding pedal. That, you know.
You know, over the years, you guys have done some pretty legendary videos as well. Pretty iconic. Many of them. Do you enjoy putting these videos together?
You know, I mean, so it's fun, but there's always a bit of a hardship, you know, and you know, there's I think the recent one, Bus, which we did up the top of the campuses, you know, and it's great, and you know, it's a really brilliant video. It was so cold, you know what I mean? And we're all trying to hide it. You know,
I feel like that's the theme with you guys. You always are cold somewhere.
I can see it in my eyes. You know, I can see this absolute. It's like, but you're trying to hide it. So there's always something like the sign video. That, you know, that was 3 days of the food fight, and by the last day, the smell was intense because it was like real cream. It was real food. It was a real octopus, and this was set up for 3 days with lights on it. Yeah. It was the worst smell I've ever smelled in my life. You know, and it was just, you know, it was a big budget video shoot. You know, and it was like a posh house. Funnily enough, the house is the house from one of the Guns N' Roses big videos at the time.
Oh, is it
something Rain, November?
Maybe November Rain.
November Rain, yeah. It's November Rain. Yeah, it's the house from that. That's the same house. And the monkey in it was supposedly the monkey from Friends.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which I thought would be a showbiz monkey. So you're going up to this monkey going, hi, no, don't smile at the monkey because it's a sign of aggression.
Of course.
But I thought he'd be I thought he'd be back in his trailer having a cigar. I thought he was going to be a showbiz monkey. And Marcel, no, still a wild animal.
Oh, jeez, yeah, no, for sure. So with what was I going to say there? The monkey's completely.
I've thrown you with the Friends monkey.
It's completely thrown me off. Yeah, so you know, these days you got all these biopics and all that coming out all the time, and you know, I won't press you on who should play you if Travis does.
Oh, right, yeah.
But what would play over the end credits?
What would play over the end credits? All I want to do is rock. It's kind of like a national anthem. We always say that, funnily enough, and it's weird, if you know, I don't think we're making a biopic anytime soon, but if it started, our story starts really strangely. Because when Dougie joined the band, and we all met each other very separately, so it was kind of a weird way we met. Like Dougie worked at the shop with Neil used to work in a bar that Fran went into. Then Fran was at art school with me, and then Dougie joined art school, and then Neil was in the band with me. So we all knew each other sort of separately.
Sure.
But then when Dougie actually joined the band, because Dougie was just our mate, used to hang about and everything, and we did a gig, and Dougie's dad came along, and my dad came along, and they were like that. George, Peter, and they hadn't seen each other for like 30 years. They used to work across the road from each other when they were our age, when we started the band. And that was when we did our first show with Dougie, that's when they met each other again. So our story would start with them having lunch 30 years before we were even born.
That's amazing.
We start back there in sort of, some street in Glasgow. So.
Unbelievable. And how much do you think, leaving Glasgow, informed, the decisions for you guys?
Glasgow doing great. We obviously had the room above the horseshoe, and we had like free rehearsal space. We just gunned it there, and it was great. But kind of, and I don't know if it's the same now as it was then, but the kind of industry was down in London. We had to go down to London. Kind of nobody took you seriously unless you moved to London. They didn't think you were, serious about your band. So many people had come up to see us. So many people from record companies had come up to see us in Scotland and just passed on us. And just one reason or another, and we sort of felt we've got to show our commitment to this. We've got to go down and be skint in London, and we were,
And the fact that these days, people can sort of, no matter where they are in the world, they can self-release. All that
exactly.
Stuff's very different. Would you do things differently if you were just starting out today?
I don't know. Probably not, because everything happens for a reason. It's kind of all the choices we made you can look back and you can go, okay, wow, that happened because that happened. You know, but if we hadn't gone with Andy McDonald for the record company, you know, if we'd gone with one of the big record companies at the time when we first signed, there's no way we would have made The Man Who.
Yeah.
Because the first album, I mean, it sold about 100,000, which sounds like a lot now. But back in the 90s, that was nothing, you know, and it was kind of, so it was kind of seen as a disappointment, our first record. And I think if we'd signed to like one of the bigger record labels at the time, they would have just gone, see it, you know, because they were signing like 10 bands, you know, for every one that would be successful at that point. So there was a lot of you know, there was a lot of just people getting chucked off the boat, you know. And I think if we hadn't signed with Andy McDonald, we would have got chucked off one of those big boats instantly after our first record. So, you know, all those decisions you make happen for a reason.
Absolutely. Well, look, congratulations on the new record, LA
thank
Times.
You,
it's going to do fantastic, of course. Andy, thanks for taking some time to chat with us.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Thank you.